This is the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, a podcast brought to you by two physical therapists devoted to helping physical therapists and other healthcare providers become better educators to patients, students, the community, and each other by interviewing prominent and passionate people within the realms of healthcare and education. The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast is intended literally for educational and entertainment purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based on only one source, and therefore this podcast should not be used as personal medical advice. While care has been taken to ensure accuracy, occasionally mistakes and factual errors can be present, as we are only human. This is our journey on the road to becoming better educators, so get ready with your pen and paper as class is about to begin. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm Brandon Pullen, and of course, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, F. Scott Field. And today we have the man present on the show today. Today we have the one and only Jerry Durham. Now, before we get into who Jerry is, tonight I want to make a special announcement that tonight's episode, we'll be doing a charity episode in which for every F-bomb dropped during the episode, $5 will be donated to the APTA Political Action Committee, and F. Scott, Corey, Jerry, and myself will match that amount and donate it to the PAC. And we strongly urge our listeners to contribute in whatever way possible to the PAC, as the PAC really needs funds to fight for important legislation for our profession. So, that's just a really important thing. And, we're just about to release our episode with Mark Milligan, in which we donated to Stand in the same thing. So it's kind of interesting how we're ironically using the swear words here to generate money for this. But I think it's all going for a good cause, right?
It is what it is, man. You gotta, someone posted to me today privately. They said, oh, the irony of the swear jar going to the APTA. I was like, well, what the fuck? So there we go.
Yeah, no. For our audience who doesn't really know a lot about who the man Jerry Durham is, I'll kind of give you guys a little bit of a brief background here. So Jerry helps physical therapy practice owners engage patients for great results. And following graduation from PT school, Jerry practiced in a variety of settings, outpatient and inpatient, from small independent clinics to large hospitals. And from the very beginning, Jerry questioned why there wasn't an emphasis placed on treating patients as individuals with, unique concerns and objectives, and why more effort wasn't being done to develop true relationships with patients. And his experience in these settings fueled his drive to prove that you can increase arrivals, decrease no-shows and cancellations, and still achieve great results all through relationships between your clinic and your patients. He's the Chief Relationship Officer for his physical therapy practices with San Francisco Sport and Spine Physical Therapy. He hosts the podcast Healthcare Disruption Podcast, along with my fantastic colleague and friend, Andrew Rothschild. He is a nationally recognized expert and sought-after conference speaker, as well as a clinical instructor who travels across the U.S. teaching the next generation of practice owners. And he's on the nominating committee of the private practice section of the American Physical Therapy Association, and is on the forefront of the movement around patient engagement, leading to great outcomes and how to own and operate a thriving business, whether you accept insurance or are strictly cash-based, simply by cultivating great patient relationships. Well, Jerry, first and foremost, thanks so much for coming on the podcast tonight. And, I recognize there's a lot more stuff that you've done, and I realize I kept your bio pretty brief with all that. But, was there anything that you'd like our audience to know about you that I didn't mention in this intro here?
It was funny. As I was listening to you read that intro/bio, I was like, and everybody's sitting back right now going, shit, I do all that. And I'm here to tell you it's not happening very frequently, nor very often. So if you need to, roll back the bio and think about how the role you play in that every day. And it really is simple. It's not easy. Took me a long time to understand all of this. I'm not claiming it happened overnight. I'm not claiming it happened the day I got out of PT school. It took a long time to come to that realization because everything around us is telling us otherwise. So I'm just trying to bring that focus back to why we all got into this, which was the patient. And like many of you, I gave up early because I believed in putting the patient first very early on, but then it just disappeared because nobody was doing it. So stay focused on that patient.
Yeah, Jerry, I realize this may be a loaded question, but to give some context for those healthcare providers who have not yet heard of you, could you give us a snapshot of your career and how it led you to where you are at today with your emphasis on the customer experience?
Yeah, so I'll set the timeline. I've been out 25 years, and so I've been a physical therapist 25 years. I don't have a doctorate. I have a master's. And when I applied to PT school, there were still bachelor programs. So that ought to put a date on it pretty well. And let's fast forward again, as Brandon alluded to. I worked in every single setting my first 5-6 years, except for peds and except for neuro rehab. And to this day, both those still scare the shit out of me. Little kids. I mean, you guys know, I talk about communication and listening to your patients. I'm like, what do you do with the peds? They don't talk. They cry. They smile. I'm like, I have a hard enough time with people who talk to me. So I'm going to stick with the people who can talk to me. So then finally decided to get into my own practice. And there's a story around that that's kind of fun. You can learn that in the very first episode of my podcast. I'll save it for that. It's a cool little story because my wife played an integral role. And for anybody who doesn't know me, I had no desire whatsoever to own my own business nor be a businessman. Doing the quotes things with my finger, and now I wouldn't trade it for anything. Started my own clinic for about a year in San Francisco, 330 square feet. And I know it's 330 square feet because I walked it off every day to make sure it was still 330 square feet. And then about a year in, Sturdy McKee, my current business partner, came to me and said he wanted to partner up and grow a practice. So that was the advent of San Francisco Sport and Spa and Physical Therapy over 16 years ago. In network with everybody because at the time the price was right, and flat out that meant we got paid for what we did and we weren't going to go out of business doing that. And that's what it means by the price is right. And the one thing I'm still proud of is we set our practice up based on the model we wanted. Then we looked at payment structures and stuff like that, and then decided who we'd be in network with. And at the time it all worked. Fast forward 7 years in, somewhere around there, the first contract shows up that drops below our cost of doing care. So we knew right away we were going to go out of network, which is the fancy term still that I'm trying to get away from. So we made purely a business decision. And then over the next 3 years, dropped the next 3 or 4 insurances to where we are today. We take Medicare and then we're non-contracted, I like to say, or out of network with the rest of the insurers, private pay insurers. This whole, just to follow up, I think, F. Scott, you asked me about the patient experience. It was going out of network that made me realize we did not have good business systems in place for managing people's financial concerns. And we needed to step up our game and be more of a business mindset as far as lead generation and lead conversion and helping people to understand what we were selling versus the physical therapy office across the street. And 6-7 years later, now this is where I sit, after all these years of having to find mentors and entrepreneur groups, because when we went out in network, nobody else was doing it. So here we are, fast forward, and just still continuing. I'm going to a sales seminar next 2 weeks. That should scare the shit out of about 80% of our profession. I'm going to a straight up sales conference because that's where all the knowledge on how to move us forward and how to engage people is. Where all the content is. Marketing profession has been doing random controlled studies far longer than medicine has. And I'll be happy to discuss that with anybody. And so, that's where I go now because I think business mindedness is a big solution to healthcare. So I think I answered your question probably more thoroughly than you maybe wanted.
No, but I think it was a good take, and it actually kind of leads in perfectly to the next question here. And Jerry, realize, of course, that you have an entire podcast devoted to this through the healthcare disruption. And for our listeners who want to listen to this, please check out the link in our show notes because we have it there. And but do you think you could describe this concept of the customer lifecycle within healthcare business models and kind of how your business utilizes this from the customer finding your clinic online to maintaining open communication with that customer after they're done with therapy, at least at that moment in time, because they're not truly done.
Yeah, right. So that's one of my big gigs. Anybody who's heard me speak is, not discharging people, just ending this course of care. Hey, we're done with this course of care. Congratulations. You're either better or we got you to the right place, right? The big no-no in this whole thing is a self-discharge. So you want to know why people are done. It's either because They graduated, or you needed to get them somewhere else, or, whether it's signed up with the gym, whatever it was. So just as a side note, yeah, it was during this time of going out and network when I realized the successful business people I hung out with understood their customer before they called the office, understood what they were selling to their customer, and then were able to have a conversation about that based on what the business could offer and what the customer needed. And here's the big kicker too, they were comfortable with the price they were charging for it. And they weren't willing to cut everybody a discount or make a deal with everybody just to get someone in the door. And I say entrepreneur because I belong to a group called EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization. They were fellow business owners. They understood what customers weren't the right fit for them. And so they didn't do business with everybody. And it was on the front end of all that where I really started to get a grasp of, so answering the phone and scheduling people for physical therapy might not be the best thing for anybody in physical therapy, including the patient. And how do we measure that? Arrival rate, no-show cancel rate is a good way to measure that. And so over time, we just started to hash this thing out. Where do we give people the price? Where do you give people a cost or a price or a payment amount who are in the mindset that possibly at the time, everybody thought their insurance would cover it. It's changed a lot today versus 6 years ago. But where do you give that cost and that price? And how do you get oh my Lord, how do you get the cost and the price? You want me to go off on a fucking tirade? We can just do a whole episode on the insurance industry and probably get the pack to their yearly goal. So that whole thing about where to get them the price and then how to make sure. This was another huge thing about the customer experience that it took me time to learn. Nothing came quickly, by the way, was the communication between the steps. So how do you take that information that's shared on the first phone call that's so important and make sure it works its way along the line as the customer works through your different touch points? How do you make sure the communication is intact and on track so that by the time the physical therapist walks up and greets this person in the waiting area, they know exactly what their goals are and they know exactly why that person's there. And before that person even walks into the room to get their evaluation started, they're already fit to 51% of the way to their goals because they know the PT is the right person. Then how do you manage them when they arrive each visit? Then how do you take care of them afterwards to make sure they don't get that big bill? And then how do you stay in touch with them, right? Whether it's phone calls or emails and things like that after they've finished their course of care. And then the big kicker, how do you measure all this, right? Because it is a business and there has to be some objectiveness to a lot of this. So, all that stuff came out of meeting my entrepreneur organization friends, colleagues, business people, and learning that once you do that, everything better occurs. Patient gets better, physical therapist is happy, business is happy, profession's better, healthcare is better. It's a what do I say? It's a win, 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 win. It's a 5-way win when you put the patient first and focus on that whole experience.
Yeah, Jerry, you kind of talked just a minute there about the numbers and what they show. Mm-hmm. Do you know, even as an N of 1, what the data tells us about the effect of the customer experience and if it contributes to successful outcomes in healthcare?
So outcomes, and let's just clarify, because I love my words. Let's clarify. Outcomes is an insurance measure, right? And that was told to me by an insurance person. And then the experience is the customer measure. So I saw, I'm not going to lie, disclose to everybody, I saw they were going to ask me this question. And to be honest, no, I cannot equate the customer experience to outcome data because not enough people are doing it. And then nobody will agree upon what to measure because I've thrown this out. I think something here, let's go into this. And so I'm going to tell you, no, I don't think a lot of it exists. We could look at what we could do. Something I reference frequently is the, triple aim. So, if someone wanted to start I'm not a research guy, by the way. So anything that anybody says you should do some research or something, I'm like, I'm happy to help you write it up. I'm happy to help you collect data, but Jerry is not going to be leading research. The fact I'm reading research at this point in my career is a godsend.
You can teach an old dog new tricks, Jerry.
Yeah, sometimes. So, I don't believe the data is there. And by the way, I'm not going to go down this path on this episode of customer satisfaction versus patient experience and customer experience. They are completely different. I have some good documentation on that stuff, not that I wrote, that other people wrote. So don't send me the article about higher customer satisfaction equates with people who die faster in the hospital. I've read that thing 60 ways to Sunday. I guarantee it. I've read it more than any of you. And don't send me that. And my one reply always to everybody who sends me that is, well, shit, this person who was going to die anyway, everybody probably left them the fuck alone. And that's why they were so happy in the hospital. So no, customer satisfaction and patient experience are not the same thing. So yes, I would like to see how outcomes come out. Yet again, we're into this complex, call it multifaceted. You can't, how can you randomly control down to just customer experience without looking at A, B, and C? So my whole thing is, well, here's my one route to go. So if we're going to go that route and we're going to go that discussion, let's just go to managing expectations and therapeutic alliance research. Okay. So if we want data, it's sitting there in the managing expectations and therapeutic alliance research, which is a great way to kill a conversation on Twitter with anybody who wants to argue evidence-based medicine, is you start sharing the expectations in therapeutic alliance research, because then it puts a wrench, in a good way, I believe, into all this other stuff we believe. And expectations research and the therapeutic alliance research is the only research that correlates with outcomes 100% of the time. And whether it's patient-reported outcomes or other measured outcomes, they correlate. So my thing is, let's step back, and really what I would state is that the whole patient experience and the whole patient life cycle is about building therapeutic alliance, and it is about managing expectations. So we could then take that next step, which everybody loves not to do. We could take that next step and say, hey, if that's what we're doing, then outcomes are going to improve. And that's what I believe. And I'll go to my grave believing that. So, because by the way, all of our past history is so bad, it can't get worse. So I've been in this too long. And I came out right at the height, if not the tail end of HMOs. So, and everybody was on an HMO, and you got $700 to manage, a post-op knee person. So yeah, I've seen a lot of things.
Yeah, Jerry. And I think even so, kind of hitting more into the aspect of too, your episode with Jeff Moron was absolutely fantastic, in which he kind of addresses it from the clinician side of it, and how you really get that therapeutic alliance and manage those expectations at the evaluation, and so many good little strategies that you can do that kind of add up to really give that patient that ultimate experience of like, wow, holy smokes, this is where I should be. And I highly recommend that people check that out. And, but looking at from a different angle here, Jerry, and realizing, of course, that this is very general and that the best answer will vary based on the facility, of course. But what are some of the most effective and cost-efficient strategies that can easily be implemented in the clinic to improve the customer experience, but of course, they're not super obvious, that PT clinics could be doing?
Well, hold up. First, I want to see everybody's definition of completely obvious, because we couldn't even agree upon that, Brandon. And I don't mean yours. I mean all the PTs out there, because here's a completely obvious one, and everybody will agree with me. And then we'll dial 10 PT clinics. Pick up the phone, right? So here's the deal. Pick up the phone is step number one. That is a value add in healthcare. Remember, so what I like to do is back this out and go, we're not talking about physical therapy here. We're talking about healthcare, because that person who's coming to you has used healthcare. You are a healthcare provider, right? And they expect the same experience that they've received elsewhere. So now we're going to go a little deep here. So your experience around something is a story that you built around something, right? So wherever you go get coffee, wherever you go buy your shirts, wherever you go get sushi, right? I'm serious. We build a story around all this, a good and a bad, and then we take that story with us to the next place. So healthcare is the same. Healthcare is exactly the same. That's the experience. Now, the experience builds sets your expectations. So I'm here to tell you, people, the expectation in healthcare is so low that you couldn't possibly fuck it up. But yet you do, because you don't understand how low and how easy it is to kick up the experience and to take it up just a little bit. So remember, you don't want to meet someone's expectations. You want to exceed them. And in healthcare, the expectation is so low. To exceed it, you basically have to do things. Now we're back to the beginning. Pick up the phone. Say someone's name 5 times on that phone call. Acknowledge what they said. Tell them you heard what they said and you just want to clarify. By the way, all this stuff is from where, people? Therapeutic Alliance research, right? The single most, with the research I've read recently, the attribute that ties in most, that the most people tie back to a positive therapeutic alliance, write this down, people, is this term. I forget what the term was, but it meant that the provider stopped me to clarify, to make sure that they understood what I was saying. And that's part of empathy, right? So just stopping someone to say, hey, can we clarify for a second? I want to make sure I heard what I think you said, right? That's building a therapeutic alliance. Those are the touches. And by the way, Brandon and F. Scott, that's what you do on the first phone call. And that's my other claim, is that we can build the therapeutic alliance earlier, so that by the time that potential patient, they're not your patient if they're not there, so don't call them a patient. By the time that potential customer, client, patient shows up and is sitting there waiting for the PT, and you've delivered and exceeded all these expectations for them, they're 51% of the way there. So, again, what do we look at? What do we measure? Let's just measure therapeutic alliance and expectations, and let's see how outcomes sit next to those. And I'm going to go out on a limb and just say they're going to correlate pretty closely.
Yeah, Jerry, I'm pretty close to finishing up my dissertation here over the next few months. Once I'm done with that, we may have to start up research round 2 or something, man.
Yeah. No, I would love to, because I want to pull down, let's pull down the therapeutic alliance research. Let's pull in some expectations research. Let's just change the conversation, every other phone call.
Yeah, right? For sure.
And then look at all the variables in there. Yeah.
Yeah. Jerry, something that I'm hearing a lot from clinicians these days is, they don't see the customer experience being significantly valued or utilized at the facility they work at, right? So what is the best way to bring up this topic for consideration or implementation to their manager or another provider?
I think that's a great follow-up to what we just started the conversation around. I think the best way is to bring in documentation. Okay, where do I get documentation? Well, I just shared a lot of it. So remember, let's step back. Let's go back one step. Your manager, if you're going to go pitch your manager, and I said pitch, and if you don't believe when you go in to meet your manager to get them to do something new, you're selling them, then you're part of the problem, because you are selling them on the change. Okay. Your manager now becomes your customer. You need to approach it that way. So information does not move people to act. Okay. You have to find out what makes them click, what's important to them in managing this group. And don't be offended when they don't talk about you, because it ain't about you, because they have a lot of people to manage and they got a business to run. So first thing I do is find out, what's important to you during the month to month. And if they're going to refer to numbers, they're going to refer to meeting numbers at the clinic. And you say, you know what? I believe I've got some ways I can help you out to achieve this. And that's where we start looking at the therapeutic alliance research and the expectations research. Because if we're doing what people expect us to do, if we're setting up expectations and then exceeding them, then your no-show cancel rate goes down. Your first visit arrival rate goes up. And then, of course, as I would argue, your outcomes will go up. And then your completed plans of care will go up. And then your NPS surveys will go up. So if you look to complete that cycle for your manager, you're not solving problems for the clinic, you're solving problems for them. And to me, that's the easiest way to do it. And it's going to be emotional, and they're going to be pushed for numbers, even though you may not think that's important. It doesn't matter. It's what they're accountable for. So the first thing to do is understand your customer, who is your manager or the business owner. And then you come at it from that angle about how you're going to help them.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense, Jerry. And now, To kind of, the big topic that we were kind of hitting at today was how do we really focus on it to, from the manager perspective to helping staff with kind of developing this patient experience and therapeutic alliance. So let's start at the beginning here. Let's just say that you hired a new staff member, whether that be front desk or therapist or whatever the role is that you need in your clinic. And, what have you found to be the most effective ways to onboard your staff member to your system of the customer life cycle?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I'm glad you guys came up with that topic. And I've pushed into this a lot more over the last, maybe 4 months or so, 5 months, where I wasn't looking at even this big a picture. But here's what occurs. I actually wrote an email if anybody is listening now, hopefully you got the email. And I actually go into this in my email that's going out tomorrow. What happens when you map out your patient experience, I found out, this is why I'm encouraging, let me go back and set some context. This is why I'm encouraging people who haven't even started yet to do this. This is why I'm encouraging people who still only have themselves and maybe one other employee. Because when you do this early, then you don't have to deal with what I dealt with 6 years out doing it, finding out that most of the people on board weren't the right fit. And they weren't the right fit because they were hired for an old model. And most of them self-selected out. We really didn't fire anybody. Yet all these people we had hired to be admin and PTs in an in-network environment, most of them spun out within the year. And again, it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. I was the owner. And I didn't do a good job. By the way, I don't even want to say I didn't do a good job transitioning them. I would say they just weren't the right fit for what we had brought in a new business model, and they were hired for an old business model, not their fault. So if you do that early on and it's just you and one other person, then you get to create what I call, wait for it, the culture. You are creating the culture when you map out your patient experience. And culture is what keeps people engaged. It's what employees. It's what keeps employees engaged. What keeps employees happy, and what keeps employees talking about the business to other potential employees. It's the culture. And all of those things, yeah, I get it. Salary, all that plays in. But more importantly, they got to be happy coming to work. I know a lot of people who quit jobs that pay a boatload of money because they're not happy going to work. So you map out this patient experience, and what you realize you have sitting in front of you is your culture, because what it says is who your focus is. So who is this specific person, aka peoples, that we are going to benefit in our community? It then says, what is the specific thing we are offering them that's unique than everybody else? So now I have my target customer and I have my USP, and it's all there in front of me. And then I map out this customer's experience within the business. Then in my job postings, I share a lot of that. In the interview process, I share that. And I show you the whole experience during your interview. So think about it, admin or front desk or provider. You're looking down, and then I show you your role in this life cycle. And then you get to see how important the admin's role is. And then the admin get to see where the PTs come in, and the admins get to see what they have to do early. And then even within that, you know the objectives of each step and what the tactics are and the systems. And you see how at the center of this is this patient. And then you push that over to them during the interview and you tell them, take a look through it, right? And you say, this is what we've created here. This is how we do it. And then, by the way, here's your 2 or 3 steps. By the way, here's all the objectives, all the things you will be doing during those 2 steps, right? So that to me, and by the way, they're not your employee yet. So how do we get employees to buy in? We hire people that are the right fit for the culture. And when you run into businesses that have a poor culture, that's the owner's fault, because that shit flows downhill. You can't change culture. I change culture, right? AKA everybody quit. So you can't change culture, right? And if you do, you need to know that probably everybody will quit because you hired them into something else. So the better you understand that experience, the better interview process you can do, the better training, back to what you said, Brandon, the better training program you can set up, the better onboarding system. And then the happier your employees are, the better your business and your culture are. So that is how we get the right people on the bus in the right seats. How do we keep them happy? We keep living by that life cycle or that patient experience.
You made a good point for getting the people on the bus, right? And then, like you said, it's a matter of keeping them on the bus and driving that thing in the right direction, right? So what are some of the most effective ways and methods that you use to educate or teach your current staff on the customer life cycle and experience? I know there's got to be constant tweaks and upgrades as you're moving along and little things you find. So what are some of the methods you use to educate them on that?
So it was cool because I don't currently. So I used to sit down after we finally rolled this out. I used to sit down with my front desk staff every 2 weeks. So actually how I used to do it was let them know that they were the important eyes and ears of these 4 steps. And I would sit down and I'd say, what went well this week or last 2 weeks and what went bad? And they knew because, by the way, the first time it happened, nobody believed me. Nobody came up with anything. They created and they helped to create the changes that needed to occur. You know what, Jerry, everybody's having difficulty with this with our financial policy. And I'm like, really? What's going on? Now, most of us, including myself early on, would go back and go, okay, I need to rewrite it. And then I'd go away and rewrite it and give it to them to hand out. Well, hold up. Who's interacting with every single customer? My front desk. So they'd come back and they'd say, and this actually happened, hey, we're having trouble with the financial policy. I said, well, talk me through it. Okay, I get it. Now I said, now when we come back in 2 weeks, I want you guys to bring me a rough draft of how this thing needs to occur. You don't have to write it up, but you have to bring me the notes. And in 2 weeks, we'll look at it again. 2 weeks came back. I asked for it and everybody looked at me kind of funny. Nobody actually believed that I wanted the information from them because they all thought I was just going to do it myself. And I was actually glad that happened because I was able to look at them and go, no, you guys don't understand how important you are. You don't understand. You guys are interacting with these people every day. I need your feedback on how to make this so they will understand it. And my financial policy to this day reads as my front desk created, right? Where prior to that, it wasn't happening very much. And then meeting with them every 2 weeks and then having them on a schedule. So having them on a schedule of retraining, rechecking things. Then, by the way, right, at the monthly staff meeting, when we change that financial policy, we would make an announcement to everybody that the financial policy had changed, right? Because the most important, back to how does everybody know, F. Scott, the most important thing was my front desk has that dialed in, right? They're the ones dealing with it. They're the ones dealing with cost. They're the ones insurance questions. They're the ones greeting the patients. They're the ones explaining the finance. Then my staff just needed to be aware, hey, we've changed the financial policy. We've simplified it down. If you hear your patient saying anything good, bad, or indifferent about it, please let your front desk person know. So I think that's a great example. And then other people were meeting with the PTs regularly, right? I'm not the clinical guy anymore. Probably never was a clinical guy, and so other people were meeting, and then we bring it all back together at the staff meeting. So it doesn't matter if you're 1 clinic or 30 clinics. There is a system and a way to keep everybody in the loop. And by the way, give me a worldwide international business, right, with all the same systems in all of America, right? How do they do it? Same way we need to do it.
It blows my mind that we are just now catching up to all this.
Okay. Is now a good time? We're 35 minutes in, 35 click. Is now a good time for me to disclose that 99% of this I got from elsewhere. Okay.
Right. I mean, and it makes sense elsewhere. Why did it take us this long to introduce it to the PT field is beyond me.
Forget PT. Remember, I'm always talking healthcare because our egos got in the way because none of this applied to us. And I used to do that. Oh, we're different. And then I got in that entrepreneur group and we do our breakouts and I'm like, holy fuck, everybody in this group is exactly the same and having the same fucking problems. It was like, oh my God, we're no different. I literally remember that happening. No joke. Literally remember happening. And one of the big reasons I got into the EO group, there were 101 members. There were 0 healthcare providers beyond my partner and I. That's why I joined that group. That's the day we started being successful helping people, successful running a business. successful doing good things for physio.
Yeah,
and
no,
healthcare.
absolutely, Jerry. And Jerry, I know you kind of talked about this initially with, with a staff member trying to approach their manager about potentially implementing this stuff and kind of seeing what metrics are they tracking to help that's important to the manager. So my next question is, what metric or metrics do you track to see how effective your customer life cycle is in your business?
Great question. So I look at everything. So when I first created this, I drew a straight line, and I'm like, I knew not the second, but I knew pretty quickly after looking at it, I was like, wait a minute, the person calls here, and as they progress through this life cycle, they're getting farther and farther away. There's almost like this disconnect. And I sat there and figured, wait a minute, what am I going to do here? And I don't remember how long it took me, but I'm not going to claim I got it right away. That's when I made it a circle. And yeah, other people had done it. I don't know how much of it I'd seen as a circle. So I'm not claiming to be the guy who invented the customer life cycle circle, but it took me. I had to see it visually and then go, wait a minute, the straight line doesn't work. So we created the circle. And so the way I approach this thing is still from the point of entry. And actually, you got to go back one step further. When I created this, there's very little talk about lead generation. There was no Facebook business and ads doing this. Very little social media inroads into any of this. So I created the life cycle to start at the first phone call being answered. I would, just for reference sake, you have to include lead generation, which is when they see your brand, when they recognize your brand, when they start to insert themselves into your story. That's where it all starts. I'm not going to go into the metrics of that this time. I'll just stick with my customer experience, my patient life cycle. So I look at basically 3 things, maybe 4. Let's see, you guys, I'm not a math guy, so you guys count how many things I said. So first one is lead conversion. How many of the phone calls you answer turn into arrived customers? An arrived customer means they know their costs, they committed to being there, they're showing up. Okay. Lead conversion. So the conversion rate. Then the other huge one, this is the one as a PT I would bring back to the owner. And there are guys like Pat McSweeney. And if you guys don't know him, look him up on Facebook. He listened to my podcast, reached out to me, took some stuff back to the owner. He managed in 6 to 7 months to lower the no-show cancel rate at the clinic. He had started as a brand new grad. He lowered that no-show cancel rate by more than 50%.
Wow.
The value to that business owner, yeah, think about that. And all he did was take some podcasts and some reading he had done and looked at what was going on and go, I think we can do this, Mr. Owner. And the owner, to his credit, gave him the freedom to do it. He even gave him the freedom to lead the incoming phone calls. So the way they were answered, he allowed Pat, which I thought was incredible, to work with the admin. They dropped it by more than half. Now, you guys don't have to be business owners to understand, but go anywhere and just figure out the no-show cancel rate and drop it in half and insert a number per visit in there, just by one visit, right? That's a pretty significant number. And remember, that is someone who had already arrived for their evaluation, right? So this is lost. This is someone who's not happy with you. So I would argue, then we're going to get into the next metric, by the way. So far we have conversion rate, no-show cancel rate. And then the next one is your NPS, or your final patient customer experience scores. And that you can use NPS, which is the Net Promoter Score. Those will go up. And then the last one, which is my favorite one, which I came up with, that I don't even measure very well because it's all new and got to figure out how to throw it in there, is the big one that I think correlates with outcomes is completed plans of care. So those were 4, correct?
For those of you keeping score at home, yes, that was 4.
Thank you. From the baseball guy. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, right, so 4. Right. Those 4 metrics are really the ones to measure. And again, let's throw out in reference to your other question, Brandon. No-show cancel rate is the easiest for any employee to change. Okay, so that's the one I would take back. It's hard to mess with conversion rate when you're not answering the phone and don't have much control over the admin.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jerry, how is your staff tracking the implementation of the customer service and the experience? Like, are you doing it through like a some sort of input system where you have a spreadsheet, or how is each individual person tracking all this for you?
So we have what we call a call log, where all new patient inquiries are inputted. That means people who inquire who don't. This is what I love, and this is what I love about EMRs. You guys want to have another fun podcast? Schedule an EMR discussion. This is where EMRs typically fail, is they're there to manage people who arrive and schedule and arrive. And I know some EMRs, if the patient does arrive, it doesn't even let you track the data. And that's a huge business no. You need to track every call of everybody who calls and says, I want to schedule physical therapy. I'm thinking about scheduling physical therapy. Hey, by the way, you need to track this phone call too. Hey, do you take my insurance? All those phone calls have to be tracked, because these people, think about this. These are people who picked up a phone and dialed your number. Used to love when people say, oh, they were only calling to check their insurance benefits. I'm like, do we have the insurance company's calls being forwarded to us now? They're like, what? I said, so why did they dial physical therapy office if they want to know if we take their insurance? They call their insurance for that. If they dial your business, then it is a potential customer, client, patient to your business. You need to track all that. That goes into a spreadsheet. And then from there, you can actually track a lot with that incoming call log. And then after that, no-show cancel rate. The EMR can measure that. Completed plans of care. I'm having trouble. Everybody will tell me their EMR measures it, but I'm having trouble finding ways to track that properly, because once you modify it, then it has to go back. Does it get carried over to the documentation so the PTs can do it when the patient's in front of them? Blah, blah, blah. So what's funny is, back to the question about tracking outcomes and stuff, some of this stuff that we need to track is not inherently easy to track because of the way healthcare has been set up as a system to manage billing and not people. Oh, did he say that? Yeah, I think he just said that.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I had a project I was working on where we were going to create an overlay for the EMRs so we could have a CRM that's not an EMR. And my partner, unfortunately, has had to put the brakes on that. So I'm hoping someday that we're going to roll out that EMR that has a CRM overlay. And the key to that, all anybody has to hear from this, is you enter everything once. Right now, I can't find any EMR where you don't have, if you're going to track the proper numbers to run your business, then I'm finding you got to do double entry onto an Excel sheet into an EMR. There's always something the EMR won't measure. Everybody tells you it does. I hear you. I know it does.
Man, that's interesting to hear, Jerry. And, to kind of take a small little tangent here on, different question, in regards to the patient experience with your business and kind of some stuff that you're learning about the process, what are some directions that you're looking to add in, or where are you basically going now with your personal and, clinic development of the patient experience to keep pushing it forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that last thing I said is developing a tool so that I say business owners, but who could benefit the most from all this shit? It's that long word, I don't know how many letters it is, that starts with an H, that's been in your community forever. That's part of the problem and not the solution to healthcare. The hospitals can benefit from this shit more than anybody else, right? And you got to love it. Nobody has fucked up the term patient experience more, because they measured customer satisfaction and told everybody this was patient experience. That's how they fucked it up the first time. Then they fucked it up the second time, places like Mayo Clinic making a God knows what they made, like a retail store, healthcare center, restaurant, fucking smoking lounge, fucking spa, God knows what else in there. And then said, oh, we're valet parking, sorry. And then vegan restaurant, food truck. And then said, we're improving our patient experience. It's like, no, you're not. Because all that stuff is done very well somewhere else, and then get that very well somewhere else. So I digress a bit here. So I don't want to just say the business owners, anybody. And they have, by the way, hospitals have that other Epic problem called Epic, which is their EMR, which will never change until someone blows it up and makes it change. And there'll never be interoperability, but that's another whole discussion, but that has to do with the patient experience because everybody's so heavily dependent on EMR or believes they are. So until we can start to measure this stuff properly, right? So looking for that solution and pushing the technology side to measure these things easier on us and not make it so much more difficult to measure the things that matter, right? And measure the things that matter to healthcare as a whole, not to just what comes out of the back end of your software. Those are the big pushes right now. And then, like I said, I'm going to a sales seminar. And if I can bring the word sales into healthcare and into physical therapy, I will die a happy man. So bringing the conversation and the psychology and the sociology and bringing in people's names like Rory Sutherland and Trivers and all these other guys I looked up this weekend, Harford, and all these guys who've done all this research and the evolutionary biologists that have brought this stuff forward. It is cuckoo when you start to dig and you realize there really is, to all this insaneness, there really is a lot of sanity on how we act. And most of the PTs I run into just don't want to acknowledge that they're part of the insanity of it all. And so they don't want to learn it. It's just like learning pain science without understanding how your biases and your beliefs and your emotions and your brain works. There aren't a lot of people taking pain science that have taken how my brain works science courses. So again, I believe I answered your question.
Yeah. And Jerry, I don't think that, we have that. I don't understand where the disconnect is, because for some reason, healthcare seems to have this ugly feeling about sales, when in reality, selling is really just educating somebody and helping them make a better informed decision.
I agree. The best salespeople do that,
that's
right?
all we're trying
And everybody
to do.
wants to say, well, that's slimy car salesman. And I say, okay, I just said the best salesman. That's not your best salesman. That's what else. And this is in our hardwiring. I get in front of a group of people, talk about getting people their costs before they arrive, talk about giving them a super bill. And they go, well, what about that one time when the insurance is wrong? And I'm like, that one time? Out of how many? Well, that one time. Out of 500, 1,000? I don't give a shit about the one time. I want to develop a system and a process for something. Nothing is 100%. Nothing in the world's 100%, right? So let's not engage on this. Well, this one time I was uncomfortable. Well, what about the other 99.9% of the time when you were really happy and comfortable? When you rather see 10,000 more people like that? And yes, you will be uncomfortable, absolutely, an absolute number more, but percentage wise, right? I don't get it. I don't get it. So we have to be uncomfortable being uncomfortable and going, oh yeah, that doesn't happen very often. And we have to acknowledge we're not very logical at times. None of us are.
Yeah, and it's kind of surprising too, like kind of going off what you guys are both saying in terms of how we're uncomfortable overall on a grand scale, not engaging in sales, but yet we're open to kind of accept the guidelines and the limitations that a lot of the payers are putting on us for putting kind of out subpar. It just doesn't add up to me at all. You know what I mean? Like, how are we okay in tolerating that? But yet going to sales, like, oh my God, we're slumbags. What?
Yeah. I agree, Brandon. I agree fully. I'll tell you, I think the biggest 900-pound gorilla in the room around all this, as I already alluded to, is this whole embracing of the biopsychosocial model. Now, I say it's the 900-pound gorilla. I am 130% behind the biopsychosocial model. After 25 years in the profession, after reading a lot of psychology and sociology, and no, I don't claim to be an expert, but I claim to know more than the average person about how the brain works and how people make decisions. So we have this is the other thing we love to do. So here's the biopsychosocial model that has bio in the name. That's what I love. Everybody throws it out and I'm like, bio's in the name. Bio is in the name, people, right? And so everybody's run the biopsychosocial. I actually called one of the well-known people doing this in the States. And I was really perplexed. I said, I have a question. I said, you guys have all this awesome content. You guys are filling up your classes every weekend. This was about a year ago. He goes, yeah, we are. I said, you guys are to be commended because I personally believe we all needed this psychosocial side of it and how it ties into the bio side. And I said, you guys are doing a great job. I said, I got a question. Do you guys have a course on teaching people how they think, because you guys are teaching people on how to sit across from someone, and you're telling them how to think differently, how to process information differently, how to move through their life and move beyond their biases and beliefs differently. He goes, yeah. And I said, you got a lot of people doing that. And then do you have a class that teaches people about their own biases and beliefs, how they move through life, pandering to those all day long? He goes, yeah. I said, that's awesome, dude. I said, how's it going? He goes, horrible. Nobody signs up for it.
Wow. That's crazy, especially because people probably don't even recognize it. And Jerry, you teach with Jeff Moore with, an emphasis on the patient experience through the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
I love it, right? There's no better segue from talking about psychosocial issues than bringing up Jeff Moore. I love how you ran with that, Brandon. I think that's...
Hey, to be fair, it was just pre-written on the question. I think you just segued perfectly into it. So
I can't wait to let him know. Oh, I would have told him anyway, and I probably would have said it anyway, so it doesn't. No, I'm sorry. I'll let you finish, my man.
Oh, no, you're good, man. I just wanted to see kind of how, with you teaching that patient experience component, how do you describe that course layout and how you guys kind of go about kind of educating about this experience and kind of hitting some of those avenues that you talked about prior?
I know everybody is going to be surprised when I say this because I'm so soft-spoken and don't really have a big ego. Yet I believe it is the best course for understanding your patient in the patient experience. So you get the patient experience with the actual clinical. And I always stop short of the clinical and interview Jeff Moore, right, for that episode of my podcast, by the way, which is episode 21, which any clinician, by the way, you brought that up, Brendan, and this is no joking. I'm considering taking that podcast down and charging for it. It is so fucking good. So anybody listening to this, I won't do it till the first of the year. So I would highly recommend. I sent it to people who don't follow my podcast. They were asking about training material. I go, I'm sending you a podcast. Type it all out, make it your training material. It is so good. So if you guys go back, and I've done this in order. And so we're in 21 episodes. If you go back in between the interviews, we have done the patient life cycle step by step. So Jeff Moore, finally, I brought him in to do customer arrival, because I break up the customer arrival and the patient experience to the customer walking into your clinic for the first time and the customer getting greeted by the physical therapist. Then when the physical therapist takes them back into the room, that's customer or patient evaluation. So Jeff Moore did customer arrival, patient evaluation, and then course of care, I call it, which is the 6th step. And he is just brilliant at this. And I always knew, and Jeff came to me, of which he'll own, came to me and said, look, we got to mash this up. So we literally start at the beginning. Jeff comes in, sets the mindset for the class, which is awesome, then introduces me. Then I go into the mindset of the patient experience and customer life cycle and why it's so important. And then I take you through the first 3.5 steps. And then Jeff comes in and teaches customer arrival, and then teaches the clinical hands-on stuff, and then teaches you how to take care of the people when they come back. And then I step back in and do post, how we manage them after they are done with their course of care. It is perfect. It's a 2-day course. And actually what we've just added is now when Jeff is actually training the physical therapist on the hands-on stuff, I'm going to start doing breakouts with the business owners and the admin people. And we're going to break down and drill down into those first 3 or 4 steps more. So in 2 days of training, you are literally going to get just pummeled and saturated with patient experience. And the admin sits through the first 4 steps along with the physical therapist. The admin doesn't need to know what's going on in the room. They just need to understand what's being sold. And so it's money, and it's getting better. We've done it 5 times. Yeah, we're revamping it a little bit. This is the first time we're doing breakout with the admin. That's where the value is really educating the PTs and the admin together, and then busting them out and then bringing them back together. So I love it. I love it. And we do it in order, plain and simple. We do it in the order, and we basically just take a patient through the customer experience, through the customer life cycle.
Yeah, that is a great layout, Jerry. I think you guys have really got something going there. I can't wait to try to sit in on that at some point in the near future. Jerry, I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight and sharing your insight with us. As I know, I found a ton of this very enlightening, and I can't wait to share this with our listeners. But we like to end each episode with this final question we ask all our guests: if you could change one
San
aspect,
Francisco Giants. Are we done? All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
False.
San Francisco
is
Giants.
False.
Oh, man.
You guys are all making me sick.
Hey, real quick. I was in Disneyland this past Saturday, F. Scott, and I don't know why I didn't ask him. There was this guy, I think he might have been post-traumatic stress syndrome or maybe a kind of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something. And you'll understand in a second. He was New York Med gear out from top to bottom. I'm like, nobody goes out of the house dressed like that in New York, let alone California. So I was going to ask him to take a picture, but then I thought this guy can't mentally be balanced, so I'm not even going to start a conversation with him. So I just wanted to, I wanted to throw that out to you. It was Mets gear head to toe, and I was like, there's something wrong here.
I don't know, man. I try my best. I got, the socks. I've got the hat. The
I
shirt,
love the pictures
jerseys.
of your son. That poor kid. I'm going to turn him over to CPS pretty soon. You keep putting him in all that Mets gear.
It has been a rough start to his early Mets
Giants. What about his New York Giants?
Oh, man. Thank goodness he won't remember most of this.
All that. All right. I'll go off for hours on this.
So actually, this is actually kind of funny. The book that actually introduced me to you was If Disney Ran My Hospital. That's how we first interacted, was that book. Probably about a year, probably 2 years ago, I think it was, right around this time. But yeah, so the question we like to ask each guest when we finish up here is, if you could change one aspect of healthcare education, whether it's in the physical therapy world or otherwise, which aspect would you change and how would you try to change it?
You know what I would do is I tell everybody I would change. Here's the answer. I've actually reached out recently to some people. I would make everybody, by the way, the selling portion and the importance of the patient was already told to us a long time ago by our own mentors and people and educators in PT, Robert McKenzie, Jeffrey Maitland, and there are probably others out there. So what I would change is and you actually have to do it twice, but we'll call it one thing. I would make every brand new admit to any PT program read the subjective chapter, which is chapter 1 of any Maitland book. You read the first chapter, you close the book. Don't read any more of it. On the last day of PT school, before you get your license, or probably before you go out because you're going to take the test, on the last day of school, you open the book again, you reread chapter 1, you close it up, and then you save it and use it for as you're going on and learning. The subjective chapter of Maitland 25 years later is still the most influential book on me ever. And every time I read something or someone talking about listening to the patient, I'm like, no, this isn't new. No, we had this. Jeffrey Maitland, and someone else pointed out Robert McKenzie, and they're right. Robin, sorry, whom I actually got to meet. They were right. So the one thing I would change is everybody would get chapter 1 of the Maitland book on subjective exam. He was the first one who said, the patient will tell you what's wrong with them if you do 2 things. If you ask them the right question and if you listen. And lo and behold, that is the magic of the patient experience.
Yeah, Jerry, I love that. And, personally, after taking Maitland and McKenzie and a couple other classes as well, I can't tell you how much, at least, getting the history aspect and kind of what you said in there has really made such a difference, in the long term, because that's not something I really learned a ton in school. And, being able to just structure your exam in that way. And of course, I know Jeff kind of gets into this in that episode as well to a degree. But, just really making it that simple can make the biggest difference. And I couldn't agree more on that take there.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool. And I actually was very excited because for the first time, I got to actually recommend that to someone who then responded. It was on an Instagram post on the pre-PT Grind site. And I responded. She wanted books, and I responded. And she responded back like a week later that she had bought the book. And it was the first time I was able to actively do that. And I was just grinning ear to ear. And I was like, that person's going to be one step ahead. That's all. Just one step ahead.
And Jerry, where can our listeners find you online and on social media? Everywhere?
Yeah. Your best bet is, Twitter is a conundrum wrapped up inside a conundrum, wrapped up inside a fuckfest, wrapped inside a clusterfuck. So you can go on Twitter, Jerry Durham PT, Jerry underscore Durham PT, Jerry underscore Durham PT, Instagram, Jerry Durham PT, Facebook, wait for it, Jerry Durham and Jerry Durham PT. And you can go to my website. So, go to my blog page. You guys will understand this and you'll see how serious I am. And you'll see the stuff I've done in the past and the stuff I've shared. And it is jerrydurhampt.com. Sign up for my email list. I send out about 2 a week. I share a lot of stuff. Tomorrow's email is all about my experience in Disneyland and what my big take home was. I got a big hint for you and a spoiler alert. It had to do with the overall experience at Disneyland. And those are the best places to keep in touch. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, if you DM me on Twitter or if you DM me on Instagram, I will respond. If you email me, you might as well just flip a coin. If you sign up for my email list, I will be in touch. So those are all the best things. I appreciate you guys having me on. This was a good discussion. I enjoyed it. You guys made me think a little bit. So late in the night. I know it's like freaking 3 a.m. where I feel like we're watching a Monday night football game and I'm like, who the hell is still up watching this game? And it's like, oh, F. Scott and Brendan are.
Always.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You got it, man. Don't forget about us middle of the country and East Coasters, man.
Brandon's not middle of the, oh, you're the middle. I keep putting you in New York, dude.
Yeah, man.
It's all that New York stuff.
Well, yeah, everybody does. Yeah, my heart's still totally there.
I'm like, who's in the middle of the country? And it's like, oh, yeah. So sorry about that. So, yeah, thank you, guys. I greatly appreciate it. This opportunity to spread the word.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. We appreciate it, man.
No, love it. And I'll have to tally up all the F-bombs there and see how many we got. And then once we get that, we'll donate that to the PAC. And, of course, everyone, please donate. Oh, my goodness, they need help.
Yeah, and let me give that up.
Absolutely.
Pump, because I'm glad you picked that. And I think you picked it because you probably knew I would have recommended that because you guys already gave it to my other favorite group, which is Stand Haiti. But, everybody goes back and forth on the PAC. And anybody who knows me knows I bump heads with the APTA a lot. Yet I've been out of school 25 years. I've been a 27-year member. I've never let my membership lapse. And I've given to the PAC consistently because the PAC is what allows us to be under that stupid dome in DC every freaking day. And we need to be under that dome every stinking day because healthcare is political. And if you guys haven't been paying attention this last year, it's political. And I'm not leaning one way or the other. I'm just telling you it's political. So we need to make sure we have our people in there, making sure we are taken care of at all times and people understand the value that we bring. And that's what the PAC allows. So even just send $20 to them and say, I listened to that podcast and F. Scott's voice was a little, Brandon's really cool and Jerry is the fucking man. So just put a little note in there about that.
Well, again, thanks for coming on, man. Always a pleasure.
Always. Thank you, boys.
Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.